Hello, I'm Amanda Whewell and welcome to week 5 of our World Art for World Kindness Day project. I hope you're enjoying it so far. Last week we were in India and today we're off to Australia. We're going to look at some Indigenous Australian art, or also called Aboriginal art, where the artist uses dots and lines and symbols to tell the story of their ancestors' journeys across the land. The stories are known as their dreamings, and every artist has their own dreaming and their own story to tell. And every painting tells a different story. We're going to look at a lady called Emily Kame Kngwarreye, who was born at the beginning of the 20th century in the middle of Australia in a town or a village called Utopia. Her art is inspired by the landscape around her, her ancestral home, the local plants, local animals, and the colours in her art changes with the seasons. She said that what she painted was my dreaming. That's what I paint, my dreaming, a whole lot. And she means she painted everything that was around her, her whole life, her whole world, and her history were in her paintings. Until she was nearly 80, she spent her life painting women's bodies for ceremonial purposes. But in 1988, she was discovered, given paint and canvases, and became an overnight success. During her 80s, she made 3,000 paintings, which is pretty much a painting every day. Emily died in 1996, so her professional career was a very short one. But in 2007, she became the first Australian woman and the first Aboriginal artist to have a painting sell for over $1 million. So she really made her mark on the art world. We're going to have a look at a couple of her paintings and try and do something in that style, and we're going to have a look at the symbols used in Aboriginal art, so if you ever see a painting you can have a look and maybe get an idea of the story it's telling. And then we've got our extra activity, which is a fun one today. So I'll do the demo and then I'll see you in a bit. Bye for now. Okay, so today you're going to need your sketchbook or some paper. You're going to need a pencil and a pen. We're using these Beryl handwriting pens, a biro, a black felt pen, any kind of pen, pencil and a pen. And your paints. You're going to need all your different colour paints. Just put the lid on my yellow. So all your paints, let's put them over there. Palette or something, your paper plate to put your paints on, something to get your paint out with, some water to clean your brush. You're also going to need cotton buds and cocktail sticks. So if you've got the art bag, you should find them in there. If not, something like that, but you can manage with a cocktail stick if you haven't got a cotton bud. You could use a pencil or the end of your paintbrush. And you also need some lids to mix in. We've got a bit of water in there. So that's what you need for the first two activities. I'll just put this down here. If you want to do the extra activity, you need 2 sticks today. These are a couple of sticks that I've just trimmed off a tree in the garden. A couple of sticks. If you've got a bit of sandpaper, you could use that, but that's the only extra thing you need. 2 sticks. Put that to the side and let's have a look at some of Emily's artwork. So first of all, we're going to look at this painting, which is called Yam. Emily painted this in 1989, so soon after she'd been discovered, and it's just a whole field of dots. If you look closely, you can see that a lot of the dots have got dots on, so there's lots of white dots with red dots on, white dots with green dots on. There's yellow dots on top of a red dot on top of a green dot. But then if you look closely, you'll see that that green dot isn't actually a dot. And underneath all these dots, there's some green and red lines like branches stretching out. And they look like they've got holes in, or they've got black dots on to match the background. So there's layers and layers on here. You've got these sort of black background, and then these branches of green and red, and then the dots with dots and dots. There's lots of ways of reading this painting. As with most of the Aboriginal paintings, there's different stories that can be picked out of them, and only the artist knows the true meaning. But one of the very simple ways of looking at this is like seeds scattered across the land. So it's called yam, and we imagine it being yam seeds scattered across the land. The yam that inspired it is a pencil yam, which is an edible plant and very important to the people living in Utopia. And Emily's middle name, which is Kame, K-A-M-E, actually means yam, and she painted a lot of paintings inspired by yams. This is another one. This one was painted in 1996, so shortly before Emily died. And this one is called Big Yam, and it's got the branches or the lines on this one, not the dots, it's the lines, and it is sort of stretching and spreading across the page. And this one can be seen as either the cracked earth that the yams grow in, or the roots spreading out underneath the earth, or both, because again it's layered, and the more you look into it, the more different layers you can see. So in the second activity, we're going to do some painting in this style. But in the first activity, we're going to have a look at some of the symbols used in Aboriginal paintings, so that you can understand when you see one what they mean. So I'm going to this page in my sketchbook. It didn't fit on the table very well. There we go. So these are some of the traditional symbols used by the Aboriginal artists, and some of them have lots of meanings. So it's not always clear what they mean in a painting. So this symbol here, the curved lines, could be a mountain or a cloud or a rainbow, and only the artist will actually know the true meaning of it. There's a copy of these on the PDF. You can see them on here, and you can find them online. You can Google Aboriginal art symbols, and you'll get lots of different places where you can find them. So you can put them together. So I'm just going to take this sheet here, and this is the symbol underneath there for a man or a woman. It's like a U shape, so we could have a man or a woman. There's a symbol that's used in a lot of paintings, which is a bowl and a digging stick, and you'll often see those together, the man or the woman with a bowl and a digging stick. And this is how they would find food. They would go out in search of food with a bowl to put it in, and the digging stick would be to dig up roots or grubs, like a witchetty grub, which you might have heard about on the I'm a Celebrity programme. They eat them on there, but the Aboriginal people also eat them, and that's the symbol for a witchetty grub. They also might be looking for plants, and this is the symbol for a bush raisin. So there's a plant. So these little symbols, and then this is an interesting one. This can mean flowers, it can mean eggs, it can mean ants, and it can mean something else. I can't remember what it is. Fruit, so lots of different meanings. The person sign that we used there with the bowl and the digging stick, you'll also often see it next to a symbol like this. And this can be a campsite or a resting place. It can also be a well. You'll often see people sitting around one, so it's like they come together around the campfire at the campsite. They'll probably have the bowl and the digging stick with them. So the first activity is just to make up a little story using these symbols, but you could also invent your own symbols. So if you wanted, you could have I don't know, that could be the symbol for a tent. This could be a symbol for a house, maybe. You could have the symbol for a park. You could have like a little tree like that. You can make up your own story and your own symbols. You don't have to use the original ones, but it's interesting to see these, and you can look out for them if you see Aboriginal paintings online or in galleries or whatever. So there's lots of symbols there, and the first activity is to make a little story up using these symbols. I think I had one somewhere. So there's one here that I made. So there's two people, and they've gone out, I think that's the symbol for a star, at night, and they've gone to a forest. These lines are travelling symbols, so they've travelled until they've got to a campsite, and I've put my little symbol for a tent in there, and then they've carried on travelling, but it's raining, so they decided to go home, but on the way home they saw a rainbow. So make up some little stories like that in your sketchbook. And that's the end of activity 1. So now we're going to move on to painting. So today you're going to do a double page in your sketchbook, something like this. A dotty painting inspired by yam, and a wiggly liney painting inspired by big yam. So we're going to use thick paint for the dots, and we're going to use thin paint for the yam painting. And if you do it on a double page like this, and we work both paintings at the same time, then one could be drying while you're working on the other one. So I haven't got many pages left in my sketchbook, so I've got a double page there. So the first thing I'm going to do is put a background on for the dotty painting. So I'm going to choose yellow paint. I'm going to find my paintbrush, which I seem to have hidden somewhere. There it is. And I'm going to put a background on. I've just dipped this straight in the paint pot. My brush was a little bit damp, so you might want a bit of water on it, but the more water you put on it, the longer it will take to dry. And again, it's just the same that we did the black background for the Indian painting last week, and the black background I think we did on Paul Clay for the crayon etching. So you want this to be well covered, not thick and lumpy, maybe a tiny bit of water there just to spread it, but not too much water. Too much water, your page will wrinkle up and it will take ages to dry. So I've put a little bit of water on my brush just to make it so I can spread it. So I've started that, that's ready for the dotty painting. I'm going to put the lid back on the yellow paint, and I'm going to start on this page now for the one like big yam, like the roots. Now I've still got a bit of yellow paint on there, so I'm going to get one of those little lids that I had with water in, dip my brush in there, and this time we want the paint really watery, and I'm going to do some swirls around here. So you could think about roots growing under the ground. You could think about cracked earth. These are not showing up very well, but that doesn't matter because we're going to add more layers. And do a few swirls across your page, and that's going to take longer to dry because it's quite wet, especially up there. Just flick that off, and we're going to come back to that. Now that's very quick, this won't quite be dry, so although you'll be working on a double page like this, I'm going to go back to my other double page where I've already carried on. So I've done a red background here, and I've done some of these symbols, and to do those I've used my black paint, which is here, and I've put a tiny bit of my black paint onto my paint palette. So I'm just going to get a little bit of that out. We don't need very much, a little bit there, put the rest back in the pot, lid back on. I've also used some yellow paint there. Just clean the knife before I put it in the yellow. I've used some blue too, but I don't need that for the demo. So I've got a bit of yellow paint on my palette. Find the lid to put it back on. And I've got a bit of black paint. Put that in the water. Now I've used a cotton bud to do this. So I've got a symbol here. This symbol, which is, let me just double check. It's a yam. So I've done a yam painting. So we've got this yam symbol, and I've done that with the black dots. Now I'm going to go around the edge of it with yellow dots. You don't need any water for this. You want your paint to be really thick. I'm going to keep dotting around and building up a pattern. So I've already done the shape in the black dots. Before I do these yellow dots around the edge, you do need to make sure that the black paint is dry first. If you don't wait for the layers to dry, then the paint can run into each other and you won't get this sort of effect. So I'm just building that up now. I could fill in this whole area with these dots. Here you can see I've got a person and a digging stick. Okay, so you could do your shapes and your symbols in your painting to tell a story, and then build up the background using dots. You can also use a cocktail stick to do the dots. Let's get a black one here. We could add, this will be a bit smaller, but you could add another person in there with a digging stick. So you can use a cocktail stick. You could use the end of your pencil if you wanted to. Let's put some yellow ones in. So if you haven't got a cotton bud, or your cotton buds get used up, you can use anything to dot your background into your painting. You don't have to use the symbols. You could do one more like Emily's, where she started off with some, we saw the sort of root. So you could have a sort of root like that, and you could build up dots on there. So you could follow the root with the yellow dots, and then when it's dry, you could use your cocktail stick to put some smaller dots on top, and you could maybe dot the background in another colour. So there's some green paint there. Put a bit on your palette, but just for now I'll just show you. So you could fill the background in with green dots and just keep building up the dots and layers, but you must wait for the first one to dry before you do the next one. Let's just put that down over there. So that's that. Now let's go back to this swirly painting. So that's almost dry, so you know what you're doing on that side. With this root painting, we now need another colour. So I'm going to put my brushes in the water, taking it out of the water, drying it off a bit. I'm just going to dip the brush into the blue paint. So I've got the tiniest bit of blue paint on my brush. I'm going to get one of these which is watery, dip it in there until I've got really watery paint, and then I'm going to swirl some more. Now if your painting is completely dry, you'll find that your colours won't mix together, but they'll show through. I'll show you what I mean in a minute. So you're just going to swirl and carry on doing that. Because this one's a bit wet, it's not working so well. So we'll go back to the double page here. I've got some yellow dots on there now. There we go. And you can see where the colours have overlapped. You get different different colours, different shades. So you've got a green there where the blue and the yellow have overlapped. You've got a purpley colour there, where the paint's a bit thicker. It doesn't show through as much as where it's really thin. And you can have really good fun just painting those layers of really thin colours. But you must wait for the first layer to be dry before you do the second one. I had another one somewhere back here where I used, again, I've got the dots on there now. The paint was a bit too thick there. I don't think it worked as well. I had a background colour. I wasn't so sure about that. But experiment, you might like it like that. Just have a go at these different styles. Use a few pages. Have fun with that. Thick paint for the dots, thin paint for the lines. Don't use all your paint because we do need your paint again in week 7. Now, if you want to do the extra activity with the sticks, we're going to make, these are digging sticks like we talked about using for digging up roots and insects to eat. They're also called clapping sticks, and they're clapped together like as a musical instrument. So if you want to, you can get 2 sticks and paint your sticks. So I've started painting this one here with yellow. For this you need your paint thick again, so thick like the dotty painting. I've got a little bit of yellow left there. I've painted that side and I've left it standing up in a jam jar to dry. If your stick's a bit rough, you've got sandpaper or a nail file, you could sand it down, but it probably doesn't really need it. You can just paint over it. Do make sure it's clean though. So clean your stick, dry your stick, and then paint it. I put a bit of white in there to make it a bit thicker, but I've now got that stick painted. When your stick's painted, I'm going to have to hold the wet end now. When it's dry, get your cotton bud or your cocktail stick and paint some little patterns around your stick. So I'm not going to do very much here because this is your extra activity, but just start building up layers of colour. You could have like maybe a red line going next to that. You could do patterns until you've got 2 beautifully painted sticks. If you're using this acrylic paint, it's quite permanent, so they'll last quite well. If you want to use your own paint and you've got poster paints, you can do that, but they probably need a coat of varnish on to keep them permanent. And when you finish decorating your sticks, you could have them on display on a shelf, you could hang them in the garden, or you can make a little tune with them. And that's your extra activity. So have fun, play with your paints, but save some for week 7. I hope you enjoyed today's workshop and the Aboriginal art, finding out about Emily Kame Kngwarreye. I hope you had a go at the activities, and if you made the digging sticks or the clapping sticks, I hope you enjoy them. You can put them in the garden, the acrylic paint's fairly permanent, you can keep them inside and just use them to play a little tune. Next week we're home, we're back in England, so I'll see you then. Bye for now.